Hi, John McElroy here talking all things automotive. Every year, the top business and political and philanthropic leadership in the state of Michigan meet at Mackinac Island to discuss the future of where the state's going. By the way, here's the state of Michigan, here's Lake Huron, and here at the tippy top of Lake Huron is Mackinac Island. That's where we all met. I was invited there to give a speech and to interview a guy named Richard Florida. He wrote the best-selling book, The Rise of the Creative Class. And Richard Florida argues that Michigan and the Midwest is going to become the next hotbed of R&D and innovation, the next Silicon Valley. I know that sounds a little bit crazy, but listen to him as he makes his case. I brought his book up here. I had to go out and buy your book to really get prepared for our chat here. And I'll have you know, I bought a new one.
Can I have that?
Yeah.
Thank you. Sorry, I brought my pen.
Yeah. So look, you laid out a lot of challenges for us. Let's dig into some of the things that you'd like to see happening. You've studied all these different cities. You've identified the, thank you so much, the arrival of this creative class. Let's start with Michigan needing to get all its assets aligned. How do we do that? I mean, I'm sure everybody here has got ideas on what to do, but you've studied this.
Yep.
What would you advise us to be doing of how we get all these different assets that we've got aligned?
First, thanks for the plug for the book. I want to make 2 points about that book. One, the Detroit metropolitan area, we don't look at cities, we look at metropolitan areas, is already over 40% creative class. By creative class, we mean knowledge workers, scientists, engineers, managers, business people, educators, physicians, artists. It's not just all, and then artists, musicians. There is one place in Michigan that ranks 4th in the country, behind Palo Alto, I believe it's San Francisco, and Boulder, with over 50%, 54% of its workforce in the creative class. That's Ann Arbor. And I just want to point this out. When I wrote that book, San Francisco ranked highly, and Austin was the up-and-comer. When I revised the book, Boulder was the up-and-comer. When I did this most recent revision, Ann Arbor. So you're on the right trajectory. What do you do to align it? What you're doing. This. You've got to work together. And I really believe, look, I think, and I don't want to say this, and this is why it's so great we're going to hear from the panel from Michigan Tech. I really believe you've now gotten the government. It's not all perfect. Like in any of these things, it's never all perfect, right? I think you've gotten the government, the business community, and parts of the labor community. I think you've got to reach out to the academic community. And I think the academic community here, I'm speaking very generally, and please, I don't want to be overarching. When I went to Carnegie Mellon was this great university on a hill that was disconnected from Pittsburgh. And I went to the mayor, Tom Murphy, and I said, Mr. Mayor, the future of Pittsburgh lays up in Oakland, not in downtown Pittsburgh. Sorry, I don't want to insult you. This is going to be a knowledge economy. And he said, we laughed you out of the room. We thought you were from freaking Mars. We thought you were insane. Watch him introduce me at an Urban Land Institute event. He said, you are 100% right. It took us a while to catch up. And I took a lot of bruises, trust me. One of the reasons I moved from Pittsburgh was I just got tired of the fights. They were tough fights, and people thought I was crazy. They didn't like it. It was an old economy town. It was a hardworking steel town, right? It was the town that didn't want these crazy creative class types, but they got it. After a decade or two, they saw that's the future. The university finally came around. Finally came around. And you know what? You know who the president of Carnegie Mellon is now? Former University of Michigan computer science and engineering professor, who I'm helping again. So look, I think it just means that alignment. And I think everybody's there. I think the universities are there. I think the colleges are there. Certainly Tech's there, the community colleges. That alignment's got to go. And I think the big college towns, you need it the most. And that requires your effort in helping them, great universities that they are, understand that their commitment is not only to education and research, but it's to building up a great state. As I said to the governor, you're subsidizing your competition. This is a no-brainer. Why subsidize your competition? You're taking Michigan taxpayer money and subsidizing California. Seems stupid to me. I'm just a kid from Newark. So get on with aligning it and get it together.
You touched on it this morning. Your book really gets into it a lot of how place is so important. As you pointed out, we're not doing a great job of attracting the best talent or keeping our best talent. So, what would be your advice as to what the political and business leadership of the state should be looking at in terms of creating more of a place that people want to be in?
So two things. One, I think you're at the forefront of placemaking aligned with economic development. What you have accomplished in Detroit, if you had asked me when I met my wife, could this happen? I would have said, you're crazy. What you have accomplished in Detroit is nothing beyond remarkable. And that was a real lift. That's not a trivial lift. If you look at we all know what was there. Newark doesn't look, I love my home city, but it doesn't look like Detroit. So you can do it. You've done it in Grand Rapids. Look what's been accomplished. And Traverse City is just mine. And I could go chapter and verse. The Grand Rapids tech talent that has place wrapped all in it. Where it hasn't happened is the college towns. You know, it's weird. You know why I think this hasn't happened? Because everybody was so focused on the big cities, it never, until Glazer said to me this, it didn't even go off. I'm not that smart, but it didn't go off in my head either. When he said it, it was like, oh shit, sorry, oh boy, there's something here. So I think that's the rub. And you know, you have all of our nephews and nieces are at this Techno Fest. You couldn't pay me to go there, but that's another thing. They're at this Techno Fest. They like that stuff, but I think they don't know where to go after. I'm being honest with you. They know they want to come back here and raise a family. I talked to Lieutenant Governor. He said, you know, when my twins were 10 months old, I knew I wanted to come back. You have the affordable housing. You have the quality of life. There are issues with urban schools, but you have good schools in the suburbs. You have great lakefront. You're still affordable. The problem is those top kids, when they graduate, don't have a place. That's what I'm thinking. I think they would gravitate to a really cool college. So you need to do two things. Make sure there's a place that's set up for these youngsters. And what they did, it's really interesting. What they did, if you look back at the growth of Silicon Valley or Boston, and I talk about this in the report. This is why they invented the startup. People don't understand this. They invented venture capital and startups. The universities invented this. Stanford invented this and MIT invented this because their students were leaving. So they said, we need a place for the Hewlett and Packard. You know, Dave and Bill, good old Dave and Bill. We need a place for all these kids at MIT to turn their radio ham equipment thing into a startup. Oh, we'll build a startup community. They didn't call it we call it a startup ecosystem. But they built that in the college town. I think that's where, and Doug Song is on this, right? I think that's where you have to go. And they like big companies, and this is why Michigan Central is so important, but they like something new. I remember when I asked the young people at Carnegie Mellon, oh, I don't want to go to this old big company. It's kind of stodgy. There's old people there. They dress funny. I want to go to this cool start. You know, you have kids. You know this. I think it's got to be partly an image thing, a brand thing, where they want to be in a kind of cool, hip thing that's a company and a place. And I actually think closing this loop is quite simple because I think you have all the other things on the table.
You know, the revival in Detroit actually started before the grand bargain that saved the city financially, and it was artists moving into the city. And I asked one of them, why'd you move to Detroit? And he came from New York City. He goes, dude, where else can you buy a house for $8,000? But what I'm getting at is they were coming here because there was a grittiness, a reality that they really liked. It wasn't manufactured. Right. It wasn't planned. So what's your advice for us as we look forward? How do you inculcate this organic growth of its own rather than some sort of big corporate plan?
So I think, look, I mean, I'm a failed rock musician. So that's all you have to do really to understand me. You know, if you look at me in Zoom, I got 4 guitars behind me, right? 2 Gibsons and 2 Fenders. Yeah, it all starts with the music. Just the art and the music. And that's why, that book became a bestseller, because the essay that came out is where the artists and gays and musicians are, the startups follow. That's what made that book a bestseller. Also got me some kind of infamy. But the point is, yes, that's what Detroit's calling card. And I think, look at what's happening, not only in San Francisco and New York and LA. They're not only expensive. Nashville, Austin, Miami. Henrik Boss moved from Miami. The one great artist in Miami also moved to Detroit because he couldn't afford to live in Miami anymore. So you're getting this affordability crunch. And, artists and musicians, this is why Nashville, It's very important to understand why you lost musicians. Rhonda will tell you this more than me. Why you lost musicians and music producers to Nashville was affordable, cheap space and studio space that they could get on Music Row. It's not there anymore. They're all, they're all getting, that's like it's condominium craze now. They're knocking down that stuff. Anyway, I think that's important. And the analog is you need the studio artist space for the young kids coming out with computer science and engineering degrees from Michigan Tech, MS, whatever, all of them. They need the garage, right? Think about it. Everything in America kind of goes back to the garage. And it's very interesting. Steve Jobs and Jack White, Detroit's own Jack White, said the same thing. When asked about what creates a fantastic music scene or great startup scene, they both said the same thing. You need cheap space, and you need a place where lots of people combine and recombine, because there is no one hit. In other words, to get a great musical act like the White Stripes or the Motown acts, you have to combine and recombine. To get an Apple, Wozniak and Jobs have to find one another. Combination and recombination happens in great urban areas with cheap space and affordable space where people can clash and clamor. You have that in Detroit. I think you need to, and Michigan Central is critically important in all of this, right? It's a spectacular idea. It's the right idea. It's in the right physical space. I think a little bit more of that in the college towns. And then the connective fiber. I think it was Ned. Remember, Ned Stabler made this point. Not only the transportation, but shrinking the mental distance. Isn't that an interesting concept? That shrinking the time distance between the college towns in Detroit so they seem more connected. That's very important. I like I said, I don't think this is a big lift. I think it's all there, and it's the alignment to put it together that you need.
You just touched on one thing that I'd like to hear you go into more detail on, and that is creating a culture, a statewide culture in this case, that is inviting, welcoming for all.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could feel it. I mean, Ron and I were talking about that last night. You feel it. Everyone on that stage said it, right? Said the same thing. You feel it here. You feel that you're home. I don't know how you do it. You don't feel that in New York. You don't feel that in San Francisco. You don't feel that in Miami. I don't know what that is. It's magical, right? You've created a magic here. And I think that magic has to extend to the youngest people. And here's the rub. I just want to talk about this critical cohort, because so many of you have kids in that. They want to leave. I mean, they want to go to New York. They want to go to Chicago. They want to go to San Francisco. They want to go to LA. And they're encouraged. Their academic environment encourages that. Why? Because their academic institutions are rated and ranked. I'm a business professor, even though I'm an urbanist. They took pity on me and gave me a job at a business school. We are ranked on the salaries of our graduates. Boom. So everyone in our recruitment office is going to say, take the highest paying job. You know, maybe not. Maybe not. May say them, and you know what? I got to tell you this. I get the calls and I talk to the kids. I went to go to work for XBY Investment Bank, or I went to go to work for ABC Consulting Firm, and I hate it, and I don't like it, and I'm working all the time, and for nothing, and for no purpose. Well, give them a freaking purpose to stay here. It's not hard. You can make a difference. We need you. We care about you. We can use your skills. We can help you start your thing. And Rami, will tell you this, with the kids coming from overseas here that are coming here in droves to go to the universities. Give them a shot. John Doerr in San Francisco said this at a Stanford graduation. We should be stapling a green card, and I think in Michigan, stapling an offer of employment, and in all of this, what you said, this good feeling, this come home, staple that to the damn diploma and say, start your work here, just like they did in Stanford in 1946, just like they did in Boston in 1950 after the war, where they said, there's apple orchards out here, we need to build a startup economy. In Boston, they said the boot and shoe industry is going in the toilet. We need to build, they didn't even call it electronic equipment industry. That's what you need to do. And give those kids a reason to stay. That's a good reason to stay. Pay them. Maybe you don't have to match the salary, but pay them good and tell them there's a place for them to find their dreams. And look, it's not hard. It can be done. If it was done there, it can be done here.
So let's talk about wages. I mean, and not just for those who are the best of the best, the smart of the creative class, but the people working the line. As you know, it's a global competition. In fact, there are companies leaving China now, not just because of wanting to not have too many eggs in the China basket, but China's starting to get expensive. They're going to Vietnam and other places, here down to Mexico. How do we make sure that the 3/4 of high school students who are not going to go on to college and get a 4-year degree are able to have a good living, standard of living, without getting caught up in this race to the bottom? Any thoughts on that?
No winner in a race to the bottom. They're not winning. The winners are losing. So stop it. Just say, we're not going to participate in this.
But how do you stay cost competitive if your labor rates are the highest?
You add technology and you make a bargain with your people that we're going to do it. And this has to be a national league. So let me tell you a story and then tell you, I think, how we get there. My dad was born in 1921. My dad went to work at age 13 in the factory. Do the math. That was 1934. Guess how many people in his family it took to make a family wage? 9. My grandparents and him and his 6 siblings. My dad came back from his 4-year sabbatical, same factory, making eyeglasses in New Jersey. As if by magic, he said, I had a family supporting job. Why? Because during the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt said, and worked with corporate management here in Detroit and the unions, right? That bargain. We're going to pay these people, men then, working on the factory floor, a living wage. And we're going to build a middle class, and we're going to set up a long-term mortgage program with the Veterans Administration, the Federal Housing Administration, so that guy with a 7th grade education, my dad said he would sit me down on the front stoop and say, this was a farm, Richard. This was a farm, son. We're living on what was a farm. This is our house. This is not hard. And, they're going to say something kind of crazy. I mean, I give Trump credit for one thing. Sorry. He was the one that pointed out that we can't keep doing this thing with China. And I got to give Biden even more credit. Look, whatever you think, there's a common line. There's a bipartisan line here that's saying we can't do this thing anymore with China. We got to reshore. And I got to give Biden a lot of credit because he didn't just say that. You mentioned the governor mentioned the IRA and the chips, the tech hubs. Look, I think if we play our cards right, this is the future. The Heartland, here's my big theory. The big theory. If I ever write another book, Ronald lets me write another book, that's another story, because they're a pain. We tried to build an economy on the coast of this country, the bi-coastal tech hub economy, the superstar cities, the New Yorks, the LAs, the San Franciscos, the Bostons, the Seattles. And what that did was create a terribly unbalanced economy with a terrible unbalancing of wealth, not just regionally, but the rise of what I call a new oligarchy. The only way we get out of this is by bringing back making things. The new car, the electric, connected software AI vehicle, the chips, the metals, all of that, the Internet of Things, that's not going to be made on the coast. That's going to be made in the middle. So this is our challenge. This is the challenge for America. This is what you can lead in Michigan. This is why the study is so important to me. You can lead this, shifting and deepening, applying new technology to you can show the country and the world how this is, and those jobs, good jobs for people like my dad, good jobs for people who want, my grandparents came from Italy, good jobs for people who are coming from all the new versions of that. Now I have to tell you this. You know who's beating us at that? There's one place in the world who's beating us in that. It's right over the bridge. It's called Canada. We can partner. Like we build that bridge in Detroit, this can happen across the borders. The Canadians have a Canadian dream. They're doing this. They're investing this. They're investing in EVs. When you think about this now, that corridor from Michigan, MSU, Tech, the University of Toronto, Waterloo, now you got something big. And then you push it down to little parts of the Sun Belt, the Ohio's, the Indiana, the Tennessees. You've got something here in this heartland, Great Lakes heartland. And that's what we've got to do. We've got to make the case that in Michigan, in Ontario, in Ohio, and people say, yeah, we're competing with Ohio, but we're also collaborating. It's all part, it's not going to be done just in one state. It's going to be done in this Great Lakes region, and Heartland region. That's where I think we got to go. And we don't have infinite time, because if we don't do this, it will go somewhere else. And Lord knows, for planet's sake, for humanity's sake, we got to do it.
Look, I love what you're talking about here, and we don't get enough of this. We know everything that's bad with Michigan. We know everything that's bad with our cities. We know all the problems that the automotive industry is facing. It is so refreshing to have somebody come from the outside, as it were, and say, look at people, you got what it takes. Just get your act together and thrive.
I got to leave you with this, John, and how important it is. You are the future. The future is not California. I love California, but California made its future. The future is not New York. And New York City's honestly my favorite city in the world. I love it. We had an apartment there. There's no better place for energy. The real future of this country to doing what you said, building jobs for real people and community and rising living standards. I look at what our nieces and nephews that are at the University of Michigan, what they've gotten from this state. And you look at these lakes and you come here, this is the future. People haven't realized it yet. And the deal that's going to seal the deal for you is what you said about the quality of life and the embrace and the affordability. And I would say if there's one caution I want to leave you with, I'm going to leave you with one caution. You're going to say he's crazy now. The same thing the mayor of Pittsburgh said. When this flywheel comes at you in the next few years, because it's coming, that affordability starts to go away really fast. So I talk about this in the report. As you press your foot on that old-style gas pedal, you've got to make sure that you're planning for the future, because I saw what happened to Austin. We've seen what happened in Miami. I'm working through what's happened in Nashville. Bentonville, Arkansas. When I went to Bentonville, Arkansas, and told the Walton family this, they were on the floor. Bentonville's going to become expensive? Yeah, Bentonville's really expensive. So you've got to work on both fronts. Of course, you've got to push on the economic talent, but just protect. You have to do an offensive game and a defensive game. Make sure all those qualities about affordability, quality of life, all that community character can stay in place as you grow. Because you are positioned for success with alignment, and then protect your flank. And thanks for having me back. I love coming up here.
Yeah, ladies and gentlemen,
Thanks,
Richard,
everybody.
Florida.
Thank you, John. My little power pack's falling off. Thank you.